Yeah, it's everyone all over the place.
That's fair enough. Fair enough. Look, I'm going to try to use a couple of slides here. This should all work. But my idea, Alex, is that I go super fast, okay? Because a lot of this stuff is going to be relevant more for specific use cases. So people can always contact us later. The contact details will be here. And I want to leave a lot of time for Q&As. Okay, so you tell me how long I can speak. I can do this in 3 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 15 minutes. You tell me, and then we want to make sure everybody can ask questions. I think that's probably the better way of doing it. What do you think?
Yeah, so the call is scheduled for an hour. You can take 30 minutes if that's how long you need to. You can take 45. It depends. Everyone's taken some people have even went over. So it's entirely, you can even do a 10-minute presentation, and I feel like we'll all be.
Yeah, no, sure. Look, I'll get started, and then maybe people can just bundle their questions, and then we do a solid Q&A. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So let me talk to you a little bit about sort of Otonomos and how it came to do this business. So I lead two businesses, Otonomos.com, which is a platform for incorporation of entities in about 18 places around the world. All the usual suspects, plus OtoCo.io. You may want to check that out as well, guys, which is putting entities on chain. It's more experimental, but it's basically blockchain native entities that you can spin up in 6 seconds if you need a quick sort of flash entity. Those are typically US LLCs, and we're doing a lot on blockchain and AI with OtoCo.io. Okay, so how did I get to this? I built some business in the UK before crypto kind of happened. I had the last exit just as the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitcoin started and happened, and got very into crypto early on. Very much part of the early days of Ethereum, where a lot of stuff then happened in Singapore, where I was based at the time. We're talking before mainnet launch, so 2012, 2013, went through all of that sort of initial phase of Ethereum, and then found out that the early projects on Ethereum, like, Gnosis was there already, Maker with Runa, they were obviously stellar developers, but needed some complement on the business side, which was my forte. I like to think so. I helped them set up. We were probably the ones pioneering a lot of these legal setups for early projects like Maker with their foundation Cayman that went through a number of iterations. Status was there as well. There were so many of these early names. Some of them, luckily, are still around. Okay, and so although I'm a TradFin guy, I worked in banking before I started my ventures in London. I like to think that I now converted in sort of a real crypto native, OG, being there back in the days. All right. So why am I saying that? We're not a legal firm. We don't want to be a legal firm. We're not lawyers, because we feel lawyers are not unbiased. If you speak to a lawyer in the Cayman Islands, they will recommend Cayman. If you speak to a lawyer in Luxembourg, they will recommend Luxembourg. I don't like their business model. It's actually not an interesting business model because you can't scale your time. We're a tech platform that lets you incorporate companies, but we speak with you elbow to elbow to figure out sort of your use case and what it would be a good setup for you. Okay, so where we then typically start, let's say that any of you here schedules a call with us, right? You went through this accelerator. Now here with Simplicity, you're accelerating nicely, and now you want to spend some time in getting some of these moving parts in place and choose a base and a setup. And so what we basically do is we kind of start frisking you on an initial call, 30 minutes or so. And so we kind of go, okay, what's your use case? Obviously, are you going to have a token for your project? Are you planning to raise from VC or any other form of capital raise? Where are you actually based? Where do you work from? America versus non-America. That universe is still very much divided if it comes to entity setup. Will you need fiat banking? Will you need centralized exchanges? Are you just going to work on DeFi? Do you really want to decentralize a project? Is there even a need to decentralize a project? Have you earmarked some budget for a proper setup? So these are kind of like the questions that we want to ask to understand your use case better, so we can guide you a little better. And so, as I said earlier, we really approach each of our clients as a puzzle. Let's kind of see the equation of all of the above questions. VC money based in Ireland, let's say. We are going to issue a token. It's like A + plus B plus C plus X plus Y equals, and then we come to a solution in terms of where we think you could bootstrap your entity setup. The other thing I want to say is that we don't oversell. We don't incorporate entities for the sake of incorporating entities. Yes, it helps us on the business side, but it doesn't help our relationship. When we feel that you're at a very early stage, for instance, where you set up a small fund and you launch it with mostly your own money and maybe your uncle and your auntie, and they help you as a crypto manager, we're not going to recommend you set up a whole singing and dancing Cayman Islands fund structure. We're going to set up something super bootstrap for you to save money, to get started, and then we know that later on you probably want to, level up on some of these elements we put in place. Okay, so this is kind of like a bit of an example. It's almost a screenshot, a snapshot of what we then call the decision matrix, right? We look at your use case, we kind of make a recommendation, we settle on some jurisdictions, one or multiple, often it's multiple in crypto at least. We kind of weigh all the pros and contras. Why is it winning? What are the gotchas? Okay, so we have DeFi and protocols there. We have lots of clients now doing RWA tokenization. Yes, there are VC and liquid funds like hedge funds. There's just core dev teams or even single developers with an open claw, ever more 1-2 person teams. Fantastic to see, quick incorporations. We have DAO and community projects, which now Wyoming is also a candidate with a new entity structure. We have these funds that I mentioned, launching with less than 100 million and so on and so on. So the core of this is really that, you're making sure you got your tech stack right, you're making sure you got your team right. You do want to spend some time on getting your entity stack right, because catch me if you can is not a good strategy. It's not a good strategy from a self-preservation point of view, because we're all entrepreneurs, we all take risks. And so limited liability was invented for us. It kind of organically grew. So let's make sure we avail ourselves of that liability shield. And you do that by incorporating. You don't do that by just staying unincorporated. And it allows us to just take massive risks without being personally in the crosshairs. Okay, that is the key. If there's one takeaway from this presentation today, is don't look at incorporation and limited liability as some sort of state interference with what you're building. No, look at it as something that has, over the centuries, actually organically grown to protect us builders and doers out there from the risks that we could be facing. Okay, this is more like then where we fill in the blanks. If you choose on BVI, if you choose on any of these jurisdictions, do you need 3 directors? Do you need 1 director? Do you need a local director? That's more where the technical overlay comes in with the salespeople here on the call. I think Anton is here. We got Greg here. We got Michael here. They know this matrix inside out. You don't need to know it. We help you fill out those blanks. Okay, and then so once we got that call out of the way, you can even just order this from our website. You just go there. You can put a basket together. You can ask our AI. It knows ever more about specifically company formation, comparison between jurisdictions, and you can pay in crypto. Most of our clients do actually pay in crypto, 95%, which has been a forte for us, because often projects start out, don't even have a fiat bank account. So they just send us the crypto. Okay, 70 jurisdictions or so where you can incorporate companies. Or you get a lot of call with one of our salespeople. They will send you a scope of work with a crypto payment link or Stripe. Okay, now I want to spend a little bit of time on what we kind of pioneered and started to call the Holy Trinity, guys. And the Holy Trinity is often where there is a project which will have a token that has a protocol, has a code running out there that is accessible to pretty much everybody around the world by connecting your wallet, okay? And also has a group of developers who obviously push the code, look after the GitHub, do the day-to-day work, have to make the subscriptions to all of the tools that we use when we work on a project. And so the Holy Trinity, obviously, it speaks for itself. It comes from the fact that you will probably need 3 entities to make this work. You got a project, a protocol, code out there on DeFi, on blockchain. You are thinking about issuing a token, or you have a token already, and you have a group of developers. And so the key considerations, bear with me here, and then happy to take any calls, is that the Holy Trinity is basically three entities that are in some ways connected without being seen to be connected, and can give a semblance at least of decentralization, which helps, especially with securities laws. Securities laws, if you cannot be seen as being in full control of code that's out there, and it can be seen sufficiently decentralized, is just one less thing you got to worry about. Okay. And so to fill out sort of the parameters here of this Holy Trinity, if you have a token, you're thinking about issuing a token, you want to pre-sell a token, first you will need some sort of special purpose vehicle, which is then typically in an offshore jurisdiction where there's no sales tax, there's no other type of tax, that is just pushing the token out. Okay, you don't want to be pushing the token out from your main operational entity. You don't want to put other entities in the group or in your setup in the crosshairs. You want to definitely make sure that the team members themselves personally are not in the picture. You just got to set up a single purpose vehicle. And then what you do is that once that token event has happened, typically that would be a pre-sale followed by a sale, you will move the proceeds of the sale together with the balance of the native token into what is then the next entity, which is that foundation. You know, foundations, I'm sure you all know, if you've been following projects in crypto, Cayman has been sort of the default. However, there are some other candidates now in the picture. Wyoming has come up with a new interesting sort of foundation type that is a lot cheaper than the Cayman Islands. Okay. The beauty about these foundation type structures, Panama has one as well, we get to the jurisdiction in a second, is that they can be kind of controlled by your DAO. Basically, you're going to think about these foundations as legal containers that are controlled by an unincorporated group of token holders, your community token holders, yourselves as leads, who will also have a fair number of tokens. Okay, so at the very least, those token holders may have voting rights, they may even have monetary rights, distributions, etc., etc. The key is that that foundation can indeed be seen as controlled by an unidentifiable group of people rather than you guys as leads behind the project. Okay, and then under that DAO, under that foundation, you can create working groups for treasury, for staking, for etc., etc. But it's all kind of part of that decentralized, that DAO kind of setup. And then the labs, as the third entity here in the setup, the labs is really you guys as leads from wherever you work from, having a setup that lets you burn through working capital that could come from the token sale via the foundation. It's meant to never really book a profit. And that I need to be qualifying that, and I will do that later, but it's not meant to be a profit turning vehicle. It's meant to be a cost center where you can pay contractors from, you can pay salaries even if you want a salary. You can do your fiat subscriptions with a little debit card, have a bank account, pay for your Google Workplace, pay for your cursor, pay for everything. So basically it's the day-to-day operational center. Now, I am simplifying. This does become a little bit more complicated with projects that, for instance, do iGaming and the sort of the how that revenue is then flowing through the whole structure. But bear in mind that the most typical setup indeed for a project where there's going to be a token involved will consist of those three entities. Okay. And so let's fill out the jurisdictions now. Typically, the token issuance vehicle itself is in the British Virgin Islands for specific reasons. You can issue a token out of the BVI without being called by any license if it's your own token. You can't do it as a living for other people, but you can do it for your own project. Panama is a contender, and they're pretty interchangeable in terms of pushing out a token. Panama doesn't have any legislation whatsoever that would require you to have a license. Definitely nothing compared to like MiCA in Europe, which is a very expensive permission regime. You should try to, circumvent if you can by just doing your token sale from outside the EU. Wyoming, again, has an interesting vehicle for specific purposes in the United States. Okay, foundation, the second building block here, they are typically based in either Cayman Islands or Panama. There have been Swiss Foundation when I was early in Ethereum, and obviously the Ethereum Foundation itself was set up in Switzerland. For specific historical reasons, we now see that very few people still set up a Swiss foundation. Very specific purposes may set up a Swiss foundation, but it's more when you work with international organizations, et cetera, okay? So Cayman and Panama have definitely taken over, with Wyoming becoming a contender. And then your DevCo, your OpCo, if you are US-based, you're looking to raise from VC, venture capital, then yes, the C Corp in the United States remains kind of the gold standard. But if you're not thinking about raising from outside investors who then want to be stockholders in that DevCo, that OpCo, then you can base pretty much anywhere. You know, if you're based in Newcastle, you probably want to have an English company. If you're based in Georgia, that is the country, you probably want to have a company there. If you're based in Singapore or Hong Kong, you could base a company there. It doesn't really matter, as long as that DevCo, OpCo doesn't have direct control over the foundation and the token issuance vehicle. So it's a separate vertical with separate owners, probably you guys as leads, who would be setting up that DevCo. Okay, we're pretty much there, guys. I got a couple more things that I just want to highlight. We're very much gearing towards Web3 and crypto now, but we do help increasingly founders who work less with crypto, only use blockchain, if we can make that distinction, push digital stuff, goods, could even be e-commerce. The key of all this is that we're in such a wonderful phase in history where anybody who can connect to the internet can start a business, ever more so now with AI. And the nature of all these digital businesses is that they can go global from day one. You have a global audience from day one. Compare that with how it was, even a couple of decades ago. You had your local company, local suppliers, local customers. So we're all very blessed that we can go global from day one. But you still need a base. You still need to work from somewhere. You still want to have that limited liability shield for the risks you're taking. And so here too, we have kind of a checklist where we then frisk anybody who comes to us and kind of ask, where are you based? Are you looking to do some holding? Is it just operational entities? Do you want to, if, for instance, you come to us with a certain level of crypto assets or even more traditional assets, you probably want to set up some holding or some trust in a location where you're not based. So you're not living, for instance, in the place where you set up your trust. If you're based in the UAE, we see people, and now increasingly so, not setting up any asset protection vehicles in the UAE. They typically tend to go to the offshores. Then there is lots of questions that you may have as well. What's the difference between an LLC, for instance, United States versus a C Corp? All sort of these things we work through with you, and we try to settle on what we feel, could work. All right. I just want to make a final note about anonymity, which is obviously a big concern, and ever more so, I think, with AI being a total privacy nightmare that it is. The sad reality of the world we live in is that we're all being dragged into this ridiculous de-anonymizer, as I call it, where we have to submit, proof of address, proof of identity, pretty much for everything we do. At Otonomos, kind of ideologically, we obviously have to comply with that. However, we are fastidious about the protection of private information, identifiable information. Often, and that's a point that many of our users overlook, we are the only ones who keep that information internally. We are required to have it, but we don't have to share it. And if we don't have to share it, we don't share it. And then typically it only would get disclosed, and it has never happened, if there would be some forced disclosure, okay? But there are needs of KYC, onboarding, especially with the ultimate beneficial owners, even of sort of a decentralized stack. Now, we got away by just naming a person who is kind of more of a representative, not a beneficial owner, because actually these decentralized projects, these protocols, they don't have an ultimate beneficial owner. Bitcoin doesn't have an ultimate beneficial owner. It may be that Satoshi still is very pretty with a lot of Bitcoin, but he's not the UBO of Bitcoin. And so we pushed very hard in some of these jurisdictions where we work to say, hey, don't ask for a UBO here, because this is a project that is out there. It's been pushed as sort of perpetual code, immutable, and don't look at Alex, for instance, as now being the ultimate beneficial owner of the stack, the way you would look at some patriarch from the olden days sitting on top of his whole holding structure. Okay. And so we do manage to actually get entities files with a very high degree of privacy, but that doesn't mean complete anonymity. I'm kind of there, Alex. Look, anybody who wants to reach out, at Otonomos is our Telegram. Anton, who works with Alex and Simplicity, email him. I'm sure he can share his Telegram, or you know that already, or just book a call with us. I'm happy to put the link here. Let me do that right now in our group. Oops, this whole thing moves. Give me a second. And just book a call. We don't charge for calls. I think you're going to walk away with a lot of intel of questions that otherwise you would pay for if you were to talk to a traditional service provider. It's probably going to save you $1,000. No kidding. Okay, so just book us in. With that, let's go to questions, Alex. What do you say?
Yeah, no, that works perfectly. Does anyone have any questions? I have one just on my mind, but if anyone has any questions about the company, token issuance, etc., obviously please unmute or ping in the chat. Give it a second. Okay. Yeah. So from my side, you have this distinction between the token issuance entity, the foundation, the DevCo, OpCo. This is a bit less practical and just more of your opinions. How do you? Well, what are your thoughts on Aave, for example, having the foundation and the token issuance kind of entity, I suppose, if you will, but not having this DevCo? I don't know exactly on their structure, but if you, and I don't know if you know, but recently over Christmas, Aave has had a vote in its governance portal that the founder has just pushed through whilst everyone was busy celebrating Christmas, saying that I think it's more of the fees from the actual platform, like the decentralized platform, will go to the foundation now instead of back into the token or something like that. I can't remember the exact specifics, but I just wanted to know what are your thoughts on decentralized companies generally not having this DevCo and just operating as a foundation? Because to me it just seems a bit scammy to some capacity and just a bit weird, and Aave basically proved that, because what they wanted they just pushed it through anyway. So what's your take on that?
Very good question, Alex. I've been very privy to this whole debate, and it saddened me a lot, because Aave did set up the structure correctly and did the right thing. But the original sin is that they took VC money. And the moment, and it's very important that we're all aware of this, the moment you take VC money, you're creating an internal tension that is very difficult to resolve. And that's exactly where the project fell victim, okay? Because VCs will have their own agenda. VC will typically be here in this DevCo. Why? They can't take a stake or shares in a foundation, okay? Because it's not how their funds invest. They're creatures of habit. They want that legal certainty. They prefer a C Corp in the United States, because most often they are actually US-based VCs. That's where 80% of the capital raise comes from anyhow. So they will push projects towards not only setting up a DevCo, which Aave did, by the way, it's a C Corp in Delaware, but also hold stock, obviously, and start calling the shots, or having at least a degree of governance rights, information rights, and want to see the revenue of these projects booked in the C Corp, because hang on, they're a stockholder. So they want to see the value accrue in that C Corp. However, the community wants to see the value accrue here at the foundation level, where they would want to see any revenue from the project accrue at the foundation level and be reflected indirectly in the token price. And so you see how these can go head to head in decisions like the one Aave had to take was, okay, what ratio are we now going to pay out to our foundation versus what we're going to keep in the C Corp? I'm kind of simplifying the story a little bit, but that's in essence what happened. And then obviously you can see that the VCs were very heavily trying to push through that the majority of the revenues would first of all be booked in the C Corp, and then a portion would be sent on to the treasury of the foundation, whilst the community wanted to see everything booked at the foundation level and something being granted out to the C Corp, where the VC said, we can't do that. By the way, we have seen similar tension in projects like Maker, which from a governance point of view has been pretty disastrous. They went through a fair number of iterations. They never quite took sort of the VC money the same way that Avi did it, but that's where a lot of the problems come from. And so if you can do without VC money, I'm not saying that to bash VC. VC definitely has a role in Web 2, although they have their own agenda. They want to push you towards heavy scaling, monetization quickly. They want to exit because they also have their accountability to their LPs. Remember, they're limited partners in their fund. Let's never forget how they are being paid. But if you can scale a project or get to massive revenue or even modest revenue, but live well and grow nicely and do what you want without anybody bossing you around, try to do it without VC, because that's where a lot of the tensions come from.
Okay. And I suppose if you, well, I mean, it raises an interesting point, right? In that, in my opinion, if you raise VC money, then you clearly aren't decentralized in the first place. So
you will be decentralized in your foundation, right? The VCs are not necessarily, although they may indirectly have a say because they may also have a fair chunk of your tokens. Remember, VC, when they come in the DevCo here, okay, they will also insist on having a token warrant. So let's say they give you $1 million, they will want for free a token warrant equivalent to about $1 million, with a symbolic payment that converts into tokens worth about $1 million from the get-go. Okay, so they will have tokens as well. And the idea is when you give them tokens is that you would somehow balance out a little bit that tension that I talked about before. They will still have a say in the foundation, but typically it's just going to be, okay, we're just another major token holder together with many other people in the foundation, especially the founders, the leads, right? And so that's where a lot of the tension comes from, with VC. Now, we were all hoping, I was hoping 10 years ago that the whole VC thing would be out of the window and crypto could look after itself and gets itself funded without VC involvement. That hasn't quite materialized. I think we really have ourselves to blame for that. But it would be better if we could keep VC out of the picture for most of the use cases, let's say.
Yeah, no, fair. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I see there's a question also in the chat from Chris. Yeah, I know it's quite early for Chris.
It's a very US-centric question, so I suspect you're also based here in the United States. It's the BBB has been actually pretty useful.
Oh, sorry, Han, just for the people listening back, I'll just read the question out.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so how does your strategy / recommendations change given the changes to the US tax code in the BBB, in particular directed to deductibility of on versus offshore R&D expenditure?
Okay. So as a general answer, Chris, there's probably more to it, right? The big beautiful bill or the beautiful big bill, I always mix them up, is it's a Trump thing, and you could probably say that the agenda was to repatriate a lot of builders who would otherwise have gone offshore. Okay, and it has some really interesting tax advantages that I think should have a lot of people who traditionally were a little bit wary of having an entity in the United States. I'm not saying necessarily being based here, but having an entity in the United States, of actually building out of the United States. I've recently moved here, and I do still feel that it's, after having lived in Singapore, Canada, UK, I do feel that this place is still most business friendly. Is probably not the right way. Nobody helps you. I mean, you just got to look after yourself, but it's very enabling. If you build from here, enabling is probably the right word. That they don't put that many obstacles in your place, and I think the BBB has removed further obstacles on tax, has removed further obstacles on the deductibility of R&D. However, the preference is obviously for R&D that is being conducted here in the United States, then it's actually quite easy to deduct some of these R&D expenditures. The nature of the expenditures that can be deducted hasn't really changed, but it's more that they like to see that you repatriate your business from offshore to onshore. That's kind of the short of it. I hope that was.
Yeah, if I made a compare note, so the thought, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe domestic R&D expenditures can be amortized over, I think, 5 years, and offshore is, I think, 12, or it might be 15. But an interesting alternative, just to pitch it out there, is if you form a 501c3, do all of your R&D expenditure within that entity, it's all expensed, tax-free, and then you license your technology back to your C Corp. That's the thought process.
Right. Although the 501c3 is a little bit of a hole to set up, right? But yes, that's right. You want to get that status in from the IRS, and that can help you. But you will then have already 2 entities, right, Chris, from what you say?
And I'm sorry, I forgot to say allegedly.
I suspect you're kind of professionally hedging yourself there a little bit, Chris, but fair enough,
Senator, I cannot confirm nor deny.
It's 15 years for the offshore.
I couldn't remember if it was 12 or 15. Not great with numbers, as Alex knows.
Yeah. But look, it's definitely creating strong tax incentive for onshore R&D versus offshore, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because what people often also forget is that immigration. Look, I don't want to make this a political debate, but immigration, I'm obviously not American myself, is actually relatively straightforward. If you come here with the intent to build a business, you can invest a little bit in your own business. It doesn't even have to be a major amount, because the beauty of certain visas is that they don't actually put an amount. They just want you to make a case. For instance, if you're going to build a digital business, you don't need anywhere near the sort of capital that you would need if you wanted to apply for a work visa for a real estate business or rocket launch business, right? So it should be an option if you guys were to consider, okay, where is now best to build my business from? But that's where I'm going to stop the pitch on coming to the United States. I just want to get rid of some prejudices that some people, especially from Europe, tend to have.
And I'm sorry, just one more takeaway for everyone. The reason this is potentially relevant is that offshore R&D spend through a 501c3 is an expense. You don't have to amortize it. And so this is a way to use offshore resources with a U.S. entity and still have it operate as an expense, not something that you're amortizing over 15 years. Allegedly.
So it's allegedly, yeah. Okay. So it's a one-off thing. You don't have to amortize, in other words. Okay. We're getting into quite some technical detail here, and we'd love to explore that further with anybody. And it sounds like Chris, too, would be happy to help on that. Okay.
As Alex would tell you, careful what you wish for.
Let me maybe, whilst we're talking about US LLCs, okay? US LLCs are the single most popular entity worldwide, because they can be used by both US-based and non-US based. They actually work better for non-US based in many ways, because by virtue of having, by default, a pass-through, what we call a pass-through tax structure, they are not attracting any taxation in the United States if the owner is not based here. That means that you can run a small software digital publishing house. You can run anything that makes nice revenue and book it in the LLC in the United States, get access to the US banking system like a Mercury and some of the new players that give you an instant virtual debit card, pay all your subscriptions that you need paid for to build your venture with the US infrastructure in US dollar, which tend to be cheaper than paying it in Canadian dollars, pounds, what have you. All the stuff that we just need to subscribe for with that little debit card. And you accrue that revenue in the LLC only the moment that you decide to make a distribution out of the LLC. Do you then need to look, okay, I'm based in the UK, I'm based in Germany, I'm based in Singapore, I'm based in wherever. Will I now have to pay taxes on that distribution? It's called, not a dividend, that distribution of profits from the LLC. And so that probably explains why in our sort of research, we guess that there's about 34 million US LLCs. There may be more because not all are filed. Series LLCs are basically not filed, so you don't even know how many would exist. So it's a very popular vehicle that you may want to look at for something quick, something that you want to hold, maybe even just a wallet in and do some trading from, or something to park some assets, push some code from. A US LLC is cheap, cheerful, and works really well from a tax point of view. Okay, C Corp, however, is like a narrower use case. C Corp is typically what you would set up if indeed you're looking to attract venture capital, or you're going to have investors of a different nature in your venture. Then people will want to have a more of a stockholder type entity rather than a partnership type entity, which is in essence what an LLC is. Okay. Any other questions here? Anything about use cases that you guys work on where you say, hey, how could this apply to my use case? We shared some use cases here. There's obviously a lot more than the ones that I shared. There's RWA tokenization is now kind of pretty, hot. We see a lot of different variants of how people basically tokenize RWAs through what entities. We've seen platforms setting up multiple entities for that purpose. There's still a lot of DAO and community stuff happening. Funds are happening. Anybody wants to share what they're working on? Have some questions in that respect?
Let's see if anyone wants to unmute. We have a few projects.
I can ask for someone who's not in the who hasn't been able to make it to this call just because they're a double book.
Sure.
But there is this specifically for Struct, and what they are doing is they are building a data business for Polymarket. Basically, they've got an indexer and they've got APIs which allow you to basically get all the data from Polymarket. And currently they have a Delaware company and they're looking to start their fundraise. Would you say it's worth restructuring in the long run if they're looking to onboard investors? And yeah, basically just
it sounds, Daniel, that this is not going to be a project. This is more like a Messari. This is more like a data feed company, tech centric, obviously. It sounds like they're doing the right thing. If indeed they're thinking about raising from VC, and it just on the face of it, it sounds like a very investable proposition, right? These data feeds, we've seen a number of our clients doing exactly that. If you think about raising from VC, then I would say stay C Corp. There's no reason to even add on entities to that. There's not going to be a token, I assume. There's no decentralization of governance or a community that they're kind of feeling accountable to. So I would stay C Corp, because even non-US investors will be happy to come into a C Corp as a fund if they're more institutional. Some European VCs, Asian VCs. So I think they're doing the right thing, in short.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, there's no need to complicate it further. What we always say to our clients, right, is the following: let's worry in stages. We sometimes have people who kind of worry about everything, and we go like, okay, let's just start with you got your C Corp now, build it up. You see that revenue initially sort of trickling in and then nicely accruing. Let's now think more about, okay, what other entities? You're planning to expand in a different region. You're planning to optimize more for taxes. Should I hold this now in my own name? Should I create my own holding company? Which at some point may make sense. At some point, it may even make sense to set up a trust for you, for your family. But let's not have to necessarily do that all from day one. Let's just get the base right, the foundation for you to start really focusing on the revenue and on growing your project, rather than being like totally obsessed now with getting the tax right from the beginning. There's not going to be tax anyhow as long as you turn a loss. Generally, right?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that. I'll pass that on.
Yeah, I think getting the base right is where you want to. Coming out of this accelerator here with Simplicity, get a base in place that gets you started. It gives you sort of the comfort that you got that protection via limited liability. The dumbest thing really is to continue to remain unincorporated the moment you're out there. Where we have ideas, but when you get serious with your idea, you want to kind of grow it. You're gonna just take the step to incorporate. And we like to think that we take out that element of intimidation that some people may have from, oh my God, I now need to set up a company. There's a lot of places where setting up a company, maintaining it is actually very straightforward. Okay.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I don't know, Alex, you were also about to chime in there, so I don't know if you have a different project.
No, I was just gonna say, I think from my side that covers everything. And of course, when it comes to any questions, we appreciate you sending the Calendly link. I've pinged it as well into the
Oh, yeah, great. Yeah,
group
sure.
chat that we have. Yeah, and then of course, any of the projects that we have in the accelerator, if they want to have a conversation with you guys, we'll make a group chat, send them your way. But I think this has been a very insightful lecture. I really like this. I've taken a screenshot as well for the notes for the accelerator. Yeah, I guess if that's all good, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll publish this, and then when the accelerator is finished next week, we'll make it go public fully for anyone to watch, and we'll also make some clips as well, and we'll send them to you as a as a Google Drive folder for you to confirm if you like them, and then obviously if you want to post them as well, just for some more content. But yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate the insights and the lecture, and appreciate just the openness to have a talk with everyone as well. I'm sure you'll have a lot of people messaging after this call, and yeah, have a great rest of your day, and to everyone here.
So when you click on that link for the call, you'll see it kind of breaks down in geographical areas. So you will be speaking to somebody broadly in your time zone. And I'm happy to send this on if it helps anybody. Alex, we put this together more like as a guide for a chat, really. Maybe I'll add a couple of disclaimers and then send it on and distribute it to the whole group. No problem.
Perfect.
Okay.
Amazing.
Very good, man.
Thank you,
all right. Thanks for that. Thanks, everybody. Good luck building out there, all right?
Thank you. We'll pass it on.
Cheers. Bye then. Bye, Anthony. Bye, Anton.